Chris Gordy of Locked on SEC. He joins the show once again. Chris, what's going on, my man? It's been a while. It's great to see you. How you doing?
I know. Good to see you. Good to be back on with you.
Yeah, man, for sure. So, again, as we look back on the 2023 season, obviously filled with ups and downs, with drama, as we would expect. Let's start with South Carolina, Chris. Gamecocks finished 5-7. We've seen the fallout this week with the transfer portal, a lot of moving pieces. There's expected to be coaching staff changes. How much did it surprise you, the struggles of South Carolina throughout the 2023 season?
Yeah, I thought, we knew the schedule was going to be brutal, but, I thought they had a chance to take a step forward this year. I mean, my biggest concern, and it held firm throughout the whole season, but my biggest concern coming into the year was that they weren't good enough in the trenches, both O-line and D-line. I think that kind of showed out. I mean, we saw it very quickly in that North Carolina game, how quickly Spencer got sacked, got sacked so much. The weird thing is, I was trying to explain to somebody the other day who never watched South Carolina this year. I said, Spencer Rattler played well. It's just he was only as good as the O-line was, blocking for him. And then you combine that with the fact that they didn't have much of a run game until Mario Anderson kind of took hold of it. And he was good, not great, but for all their deficiencies, they still were able to come up with, a good win over a good Kentucky team. I mean, I know Kentucky, from their perspective, they didn't want to lose that game. But I mean, the Florida game was there for the taking, and a few of these other games. I mean, if you could do just a little bit more on offense, the Clemson game was there for your take. I mean, you held them to 16 points. So, it was definitely a step back in, Shane Beamer's book. I think a lot of people wanted this to be a year you took a step forward. But again, the schedule was just so tough. I think it was hard to really execute that.
Now, Chris, obviously you're looking at things at South Carolina from the outsider perspective, of course. So when you look at Shane Beamer going into year 4, I mean, I think most agree it's going to be a pivotal year. Year 3, fairly unfairly, kind of labeled as a year where if you're going to pop, you pop in year 3 as a head coach, and certainly 5-7 fell short of all expectations. Now you move into a year 4. I mean, how do you view Shane Beamer at South Carolina? It feels, Chris, very similar to the trajectory and the path that maybe Sam Pittman's been on at Arkansas, where this guy was looked at. He's one of our own, right? Each school looked at the guy that way, culture hire, what have you. Had some really big time early success. Things started to teeter out. Obviously, we saw the turmoil with Arkansas this year. And of course, Pittman's coming back next year. I think under the understanding that if they don't win, he is going to be fired. Do you view Shane Beamer kind of in that same way? Like, what do you, when you look at projecting way too far ahead 2024, the level of pressure that Beamer is under next year at South Carolina?
Yeah, I think it steps up for him, but I think it's everybody across the SEC, right? Like, I kept telling everybody, be careful what you wish for with conference expansion. Like, yeah, Texas and Oklahoma, we only want the best in the SEC. Yeah, okay, but somebody still has to suck, right? Like, somebody still has to lose. And odds are you might be the team you're playing. Yeah, bring them over. Oh, wait, we're going to suck because those teams are really good. I kept saying, like, you want conference expansion, let's bring in Wake Forest. Let's bring in Indiana. Let's bring in mid to lower tier teams that gives everybody else a chance to get wins. Big reason why we're still with 8-win conference schedules, because some of these middle tier programs are still looking at it going, I need my 4 cupcakes. I need my 4 winnable games, because then I only need to win 2 SEC games, and that gets me to 6. Well, that's all going to change if we go to the 9-game conference schedule like I think we will in 2025. But yeah, it's a big year for Shane Beamer. Obviously, from 7-6 to 8-5, and the huge wins over Tennessee and Clemson last year were awesome. And then to come, all that comes crashing back down this year. You go to 5-7 with Spencer Rattler back as a senior, with Juice Wells, banged up, but here comes Xavier Leggett with, having an awesome year. I mean, all these different things you had going for you, and it was 5-7. I mean, you start looking at next year and going, you go 5-7 next year. Yeah, I think there's absolutely reason to make a change, but I think everybody's doing that across the SEC. I mean, Florida's looking at it going, all right, Billy Napier, next year's a big year for you. Arkansas saying, Sam Pittman, next year's a big year for you. I mean, so there's tons of programs in that same boat, and again, it's just not getting easier anytime soon. It's only going to get more difficult.
Chris, sticking with the theme of talking about head coaches, there's a pair of new head coaches in the SEC already. Of course, Jimbo Fisher and Zach Arnett get the axe at their respective schools. Mike Elko is hired at Texas A&M, and Jeff Lebby hired at Mississippi State. Your thoughts on those moves and the hirings of each of those two coaches at those respective schools?
Yeah, I thought the Elko hire's fine. I mean, I don't know if it's like, oh my God, let me renew my season tickets right now. I can't wait to see Mike Elko's football. Like, I still think the Mark Stoops move made a lot of sense. I thought it would have been a good move for them. I know a lot of Aggie fans were in their feelings about it. No, he stinks. We don't want to hire the Kentucky coach. Yeah, so you want to hire the Duke coach? I mean, it's like you want to put down Kentucky. Like you're looking all Lance Leipold's name was in there. Like, why not go hire a basketball school coach? I mean, why not? But like Mark Stoops has been awesome at Kentucky. What everybody forgets, and look at the win-loss record, he's at Kentucky with Kentucky resources. If you give him A&M resources, he's going to be even better. Like after they lost to Georgia this year, everybody got up in arms over Mark Stoops going, well, look, they got tons of 4- and 5-star players over there. You want some of those guys? Put up your money. We need more NIL money. People are like, oh, Mark Stoops, how can you say that? Well, if he went to A&M, he would have that money. He would have the 4- and 5-star recruits. Stoops would be awesome at A&M. But for some reason, all these people are like, no, he sucks. He sucks. But Mike Elko, he's a winner. Like somebody said, Mike Elko is Mark Stoops without the wins. It's like they're like the same guy. Like, okay, sure, we'll go with Elko. Like, don't know if he's going to be any better. We'll see. They just like him because he was there before, right? Like anybody who had been there before and had success, you're going to like that guy. I use the same example. Like Dave Aranda was the DC at LSU when they won the championship. Dave Aranda's name comes up all the time at LSU. Oh, you think we can get Aranda? Because they liked him. He was really good in a small sample size there. Same thing with Elko. I'll say this, whoever Elko hires as his OC, it better be damn good. Now, he's got $11 million to play with to hire his staff, but he will be as good as his OC hire is. If he hits a dud there and the defense is great, but the offense is mid, I mean, he's going to be looking at a lot of 8-4, 7-5 seasons. And guess what? Jimbo Fisher was doing that already. So did you really upgrade? I mean, yeah, I get it. Everybody was frustrated with Jimbo and they wanted to change. They wanted just something new in there. But I don't know if, but like, I'm seeing a lot of media types go, oh, it's a home run hire. I'm like, is it? Like, this guy Duke, like I used the Louisville game as an example this year. Like, Kentucky and Mark Stoops just beat Louisville in their house, ranked in the top 10. A few weeks ago, Duke lost to Louisville 23-0. I'm like, what? Stoops versus Elko? Like, what am I missing here? But anyway, we'll see what happens. I like, if you're an LSU fan or an Alabama fan or a Georgia fan or somebody in the SEC, the Mike Elko hire at A&M doesn't scare me. I'm not like, oh my God, A&M is about to be a force. They've never been a force. Best they can do is 8-4, maybe a 9-3 in there. But like, as we know, 10-2 get you into the playoffs start next year. So, you don't have to be the best team in the SEC anymore. And the Jeff Lebby hire, I think, is awesome. It's catch a rising star, like a dude who's great offensive mind. Mississippi State, I know those fans were super just like disappointed what they were watching this year, defensive or offensively. So it's going to bring a brand of excitement. They're going to score a bunch of points, and they could be a thorn in the side for a lot of schools in the SEC. I think you'll look at that schedule and go, yeah, Mississippi State. Oh, that team. That's one of those like sandwich games that like we could get upset in. I think that's the kind of program Jeff Lebby can build there. And again, like 7-5, I think is really good at Mississippi State. They would like a bunch of consecutive 7-5s, a couple 8-4s mixed in there. So I think the blessing and the curse with it is if Lebby's really good, like if they go 10-2 in year 2, he'll be gone after that. So you'll have to replace him. But I think you take a chance on that, right? I mean, if this guy hits and he's really good, then great. Then he brought some great years to Mississippi State. So I think it's low risk, high reward for Jeff Lebby.
Chris, back to your point about Texas A&M. It's always they're talking about national championships. The expectation for Jimbo Fisher was win a national title. You heard Mike Elko mention that as well. The best version of A&M is winning a national championship. Do you view those national championship expectations as delusional or admirable, the way they operate and talk about it and set that as the standard, although that standard has really never been met at Texas A&M? Like, what's your overall take on that?
Yeah, I would say aspirational. Look, we forget before Saban got back to Bama that Bama was in a tough spot. Prior to Kirby, Georgia was very good and, had some great years under Mark Richt, but they could just never break through. It takes somebody to come in and completely change the culture around what you have. Now you have certain programs like Auburn and LSU that can break through for that championship because the talent is so good on the roster. And LSU has the benefit of not competing with anybody in the state of Louisiana for recruits. Auburn, hit big with a Cam Newton, and every now and then you have a special player like that could take you to the next level and get you a championship. But you got to have that culture, and just A&M's never really had that. They have hungry. In fact, I would use the word desperate. A fan base that's desperate for relevance and a championship, and they're willing to write the check. It's not, oh my God, it's a lot of money. It's how much do you need? Blank check. Here's the money. We will buy a championship, but they're finding you can't buy a championship. You got to have a combination of good coaching, good players, good culture. All of it all has to mesh well and come together. And again, I admire the Aggies. Like, yeah, that's what you should want. You should want to be great and national relevance and playing for titles, but it takes time to build, and you got to build that culture from within. And they just haven't had that. I mean, it's just been tough to build there. So I'm not saying they can't get there, but it's going to take somebody really special to build that. Is Mike Elko that guy? We're going to find out here.
Chris, it's always fun to make predictions and over the summer, that's what we do, right? The whole SEC Media Days thing, and then leading up, right? We think we know what we're talking about. We think we know what we're doing. We predict certain things. For me, because my question for you is, when you look back on what you thought you knew back in August versus where we sit right now, what was the thing that stands out? Like, man, like that surprised me, or that went much differently than I expected. For me, Chris, I had both Ole Miss and Missouri going 6-6. Very much so missed both of those. Did not see those two teams being as good as they've been. I mean, I think certainly Mizzou, I think the biggest surprise in the SEC to this point. But when you look back and now you sit here today, what's the thing, as you said, as the dust is settled in the regular season, that you say, man, like that really surprised me, or that thing that I thought is much different right now than I saw it playing out?
Yeah, George, Ole Miss turned out to be way better defensively than I thought. They had some bad performances, obviously, but Pete Golding, I thought it was going to take him at least a year because they're recruiting very well. They got some really good defensive recruits coming into Ole Miss's class next year. So I thought maybe by next year, but they played really well. There was a stretch of games where they were playing really well, keeping teams under 400 yards and, keeping low scoring, games, not, under 30. So like, Ole Miss was better defensively, and that's how they were able to get the 10 wins. Obviously, Mizzou offensively. Nobody saw Cody Schrader becoming the SEC leader in rushing. Nobody saw, Eli Drinkwitz making Brady Cook into one of the better quarterbacks in the SEC. And obviously, having Luther Burden, I thought he would take that next step, and he did. But to me, one of the most shocking surprises of this season for me was how bad LSU's defense was. Because I knew Jaden Daniels was going to take a step forward. I didn't know he would be this good. I didn't think he would be Heisman level, ridiculous, like make a play. Like Jaden Daniels, I think they said, averaged over 10 yards per touch. When the ball touched his hands, he averaged a first down this year. It's absolute insanity. Matt House's defense was historically bad. LSU thought they had the worst defense ever a couple years ago when Bo Pelini was coaching in 2020. No, Matt House surpassed that. He had an even worse defense this year. It was crazy to see, and it sucks for LSU because if they have even just an average defense, if they had Ole Miss's defense, they would be 10-2 at minimum, or maybe we're talking about 11-1. Maybe we're talking about they beat Alabama and Tuscaloosa, because when people forget about that night, the offense was good enough. Jaden Daniels and LSU were going up and down the field scoring touchdowns, and it's hard to score touchdowns at Bryant-Denny Stadium at night. Now, on the flip side, Jalen Milroe scoring touchdowns back and forth, left and right, and then, of course, Jaden throws the interception at the start of the fourth, and then they knock him out of the game, and that was all she wrote. They lost that game. But if LSU had a modicum of a decent defense, we're talking about LSU sitting here in Atlanta again for the second straight year, instead of Alabama. So that one kind of surprised me. The Auburn, I knew they were going to go through some growing pains with all the guys they brought into the transfer portal. I just didn't know it was going to be this roller coaster of the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. I mean, it's like, how do you break through and you start winning some SEC games? You beat the hell out of Arkansas, and then you lose to New Mexico State, and then you nearly beat Bama. I mean, it was just this like ridiculous roller coaster of a year. And Arkansas, I thought, if you'd have told me, I mean, SEC Media Days, we were talking about Arkansas is bringing back so many pieces on their offensive line. You're bringing back KJ Jefferson, a fifth-year senior. You're bringing back Rocket Sanders, one of the best running backs in the country a year ago. And Arkansas is going to go whatever they went, 4 wins or whatever it was. Like, that's just insane. It's insane. So, yeah, there were a lot of things that surprised me, but to me, the biggest one I would put is LSU's defense, and then Missouri's offense. I think was surprised all of us.
You mentioned Arkansas, and that brings me to, KJ Jefferson. Obviously, it sounds like there's a good chance he's going to be entering the transfer portal. The Gamecocks, of course, have felt the impacts of that with Juice Wells literally yesterday. 11 days ago, he says he's coming back. I guess he didn't specify South Carolina in his post because obviously it's reported yesterday he's getting into the portal. Your thoughts, Chris? I know this is kind of a random topic, whatever, but, we're in the season. 'Tis the season of the portal and the madness. It's funny. I've talked a lot, Chris, this week about it used to be, once the SEC championship game got played, we're looking forward to bowl season. We're getting more into college basketball. Maybe we're talking some recruiting, but things kind of die down. With the portal, man, I mean, it's daily madness. So for folks like you and I and others who create content, it's great. For the diehard fan, obviously, it's terrible because you're seeing your favorite athletes, sometimes big contributors up and leave. Your thoughts on the portal, NIL, where we currently sit in college football, because, Gamecock fans will feel some kind of way, Arkansas fans, but it's affecting everybody. Like, everybody is dealing with this portal and NIL era of college football.
Yeah, I mean, it's free agency. It's, everybody's on a 1-year contract. And when the season ends, you literally have to go back and re-recruit every guy. And, it's funny because it's not, look, for the record, I have no problem with guys making money. I think it's awesome. I think it's better in their pockets than, the rich, old, stodgy people sitting up running college football. It's fine. But by the same realm, players are being told, know your value, hit the portal no matter what. It's like the word loyalty is thrown out there, and I get it. People throw, the coaches aren't loyal. Yeah, they're pretty loyal unless some better opportunity comes along. I mean, that's like any job in America. It'd be like, if I was offered a promotion tomorrow with another company, it would pay me double my salary. Would I really go, no, look, man, I got to be loyal to my boss? Like, hell no. Like, you go take the opportunity. But by the same realm, like the players, put it this way, like there's some guys who grow up in Columbia, South Carolina, who dream of playing at Williams-Brice and running out that tunnel and playing all their games there. Like, there's not many of those kids anymore. Like, it's those kids are the through and through. Like, I was told that the two kids, the offensive linemen at LSU, Emory Jones and Will Campbell, they were awesome freshmen last year, starting on the O-line at LSU. They got offered a ton of offers in NIL in the offseason, like last offseason, like, hey, hit the portal and we'll get you NIL to come play here. Those kids just love LSU, and they happen to be born in Louisiana. You can't do anything about that, but those kids seem to be fewer and far between now, as opposed to, I don't care. Hey, I've never been to Colorado. I'll go play up there. It's like and I get it. Like, there's a market and somebody's willing to pay you, but like, there's just the loyalty's kind of out the window now. But look, the quarterbacks are the ones who can succeed most with it. I just go back to like NIL. The whole point of it was a Tim Tebow or Johnny Manziel or whoever, Honey Badger at LSU, these guys who were like huge stars in college. They should be able to profit. If I want to sell a t-shirt with my name on it, I should be able to make that money. If a local car dealer wants to pay me $10,000 to come do an autograph signing, I should be able to do it. Yes, yes, and yes. Those are all what NIL was intended for. The intention of NIL was not, hey, I'm a free agent who wants to pay me most in the portal. Like, that's not what the intent of it was. I don't know how you stop it now. It just kind of is what it is. So, and look, some programs are going to benefit off of it. If KJ Jefferson puts himself out there and says, I'll go to the highest bidder, and South Carolina's new NIL fund says we want to pay him, and obviously the connection with Dole Loggins, works a lot. Why not? I mean, sure, why not? Make it work for the player, but we've seen some kids get burned, and it hasn't worked out. Peyton Thorne got an NIL deal to go down to Auburn. He sucked. Or, that NIL money is not going to be there next year. So it can hurt kids just as much as it can help them.
Chris, let's move to the SEC championship game. Obviously, tomorrow at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, we're all looking forward to Georgia and Alabama. And it's funny how, again, we spend all preseason making predictions and bold, statements, what have you, and things come right back to Georgia and Bama, as we all should have known. Let's start on the Alabama side. I'll ask you this. Has this been the best coaching job by Nick Saban to date at Bama when you look at what Alabama was against Texas, and especially that following week against USF, what the quarterback situation was, the way Jalen Milroe was evolved. How do you evaluate Nick Saban and Alabama and their progression and growth throughout this season?
He's done a good job. I mean, but look, that job is so much easier when you're the greatest coach of all time and you still have a roster full of 4 and 5 stars. Like, what was the biggest gripe? Oh, this O-line full of 5 stars isn't playing like it. Oh, sad. No one else is crying for you. Sorry. And then they started to put some things together and they started to play well. Has Milroe played much better? Yes, but I caution people a little bit because go back into that A&M game where the offense didn't do a whole heck of a lot. They got out with the 6-point win. They were lucky to win that. The next week, they come out strong against Arkansas. Second half, that offense bogs down. They can't do anything. They had to hang on for their dear lives. The next week, they play Tennessee. Awful first quarter. Offense stunk. They meet at halftime. They make some adjustments. Offense looked much better in the second half. The next weeks to follow, they whipped up on LSU. Terrible defense. They whipped up on Kentucky, not a great defense, and they put 66 on Chattanooga, whatever. Point being, like, the narrative after those 3 games became, oh my God, Jalen Milroe's playing lights out. He is so much better. And I'm looking going, yes, but they've also played terrible defenses. Like, we need to account for that, right? Like, this isn't like he just played, Georgia in here. He hasn't played a good defense in that stretch. Finally, they played a good Auburn defense a week ago, and look what happened. They needed a prayer, a miracle in the final seconds to get the win. My point being is that Bama's offense against good to decent defenses is about 24 points. We saw 24 against Ole Miss. We saw, 26 against A&M. We saw, the 27, which really should have been 21 against Auburn. But, point being, that's about what they're getting. So I'm predicting Bama's going to score probably around 24 this weekend against Georgia. I think Georgia scores more. When I started digging through the numbers, I couldn't believe Georgia's offense is 100 yards better a game than Alabama's is. Like, they're better offense. Georgia runs the ball down your throat. Carson Beck, with all the weapons they have, they rested Ladd McConkey last week. They rested Brock Bowers. They rested all these guys to get them ready for the SEC title game. I know that spread, it was 4, then it was 5, now it's around 6. I think this is a double-digit win for Georgia. I just think it's close at halftime. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if Bama goes right down the field and scores with the ball first. Why? Because it's happened to Georgia all year. Florida did it. Tennessee did it. Like all these teams they played go down the field and you go, oh my God, Georgia's down 7-0. And then Georgia scores 28 unanswered, and it's 28-7. You're like, oh my God, what happened? I think this is a game like Milroe, for Bama to win, Milroe's got to play flawless. He cannot make any mistakes, and he's done that throughout this season. We saw the terrible interception. Like, what were you looking at there? We've seen him get sacked and loses the ball, and it's a fumble. If that happens, they're in big trouble, and Georgia will run away with this one. So it's just Georgia's a better team. It's no offense to Alabama. Saban is still the greatest of all time. It's crazy to think when Bama is 11-1, it's considered, oh my God, this is a down year. Like, you have raised expectations at that program. But all this stuff, people wanting to bring up the history. Oh, it's 3-0 against Kirby in that building in the SEC title game. That's fine. History doesn't mean jack right now. The last time Bama beat Kirby in that building, this Georgia team has gotten a lot better since that point. Like, they just have. They've recruited well. They are now 4 or 5 deep at every position, like Alabama was in their prime. So. Again, I think Alabama, very good team, but I think they've done a little bit with smoke and mirrors at times, and it sounds like I'm being disrespectful to Alabama. I'm not. I just like Kevin Steele. He's an okay DC. He's not one of the best ever. I think that shows through this weekend. I think the better coaching staff, led by Kirby Smart, gets the win.
I would agree with you, Chris. I've also got Georgia winning the football game. Last thing, and I'll get you out of here, Chris Gordy, Locked On SEC. Appreciate you taking the time. Because again, we both got Georgia winning this football game, but if Alabama is to edge out Georgia, if that happens, should the Crimson Tide be in the college ball playoff?
The correct answer is I have no idea. Like, I do not.
Fair enough.
I do not fancy that committee. In fact, if Bama, the minute they win that game on Saturday and I'm on that committee, I would be, can I get a double, please? Like, I would be drinking heavily. I have no idea what you do because what do you do? I mean, it is Armageddon in terms of this last 4, and thank God we're going to 12-team playoff next year. But what really rubs me the wrong way is what Bill Hancock said the other night is that it's the four best teams. We've never said the most deserving. We've never said, it's like, oh yeah, why should resumes matter? Like, yeah, best. Do you realize what best means? If I ask you right now what the best Chinese restaurant is in Columbia, South Carolina, you realize like 8 people would have 8 different answers? Like, best is subjective, man. Everybody's got a different opinion on what best is. So I think resume matters. I think strength of schedule should matter. The fact that Oregon is still so far ahead of Texas and Alabama, I think is a joke. Oregon's look great, but Oregon's played nobody. Their strength of schedule's been around the 60s. Like, why do we not take that into account and say you haven't really played anybody? Like, we should knock you down. But man, I think you get in a real debate there. If Georgia's number 1 and they lose on a last-second field goal to Alabama, and it's their first loss of the season, you're really going to drop Georgia from 1 to 5? Like, you have said all year they're one of the best. They're the best team in the country. So how do you drop them down 4 spots? And then, on a last-second field goal. And then on the flip side for Bama, if they win on a last-second field goal over the number 1 team, is that enough to go from 8 to 4? I mean, and again, above some of these other teams that may have better resumes. And to me, the biggest one is if Texas manhandles Oklahoma State tomorrow, and it's between Texas and Bama, how do you not use head-to-head? You're literally telling me that game back in September means nothing. Okay, then why did we play it? It didn't mean anything. Oh, Bama's so much better now. Okay, great. It should still be resume. It's the qualification is not who's the hottest team at the end of the season. That's an NCAA tournament thing, right? Like, oh, this team's won 8 of their last 9. They're an 8 seed in the tournament. That reasoning works there. But here we're talking about 4 teams, and it's got to be all-encompassing, full resume from the entire year. And to me, Texas has played an awesome strength of schedule. They've beat a lot of top 25, Big 12 teams, and on top of it, they've got the best win in the country, a double-digit win over Bama in their house. So, to me, Texas, I think, deserves to be in there, but unfortunately, Florida State wins, they're not getting in, and I think everything might hold serve. Like, I know Washington's a double-digit underdog against Oregon, but you don't think Washington's using that as bulletin board material going, what the hell more do we need to do? We beat the hell out of everybody we played. We're undefeated. We have Michael Penix, and they still think Oregon's better than us, even though we beat them earlier this year? Like, it's insanity. I'm hoping for the sake of everything, if I'm on that playoff committee, that Georgia wins, Michigan wins, Washington wins, and Florida State wins, and they make this whole thing very easy for us.
I like what you said too, Chris. You know what can help solve this? A 12-team college football playoff, which I'm in favor of. It sounds like you are as well. And again, it's going to add more layers of madness with who should be 11, who should be 12, but not quite the levels of certainly you look at this year. I don't envy the job of the committee determining the top 4. Chris Gordy, Locked on SEC, my friend. It's always a pleasure. You do a great job. Keep up the great work, and we'll chat again soon, my man.
Awesome. Thanks, man.